Welcome back, everyone. I'm Alan Paul Roberts, author of The Globalist Plan to Collapse Everything, and you're listening to the Globalist Plan to Collapse Everything podcast, the show where we pull back the curtain on the systems that shape our lives and we ask the hard questions. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for some time because we're diving into a topic that touches literally every one of us, and that's the medical system. Not just the inconveniences we all complain about, the long waits, the rushed appointments, the bills that seem to arrive like a second diagnosis. No, I'm talking about something far more troubling. I'm talking about a system that many believe has been deliberately engineered from the ground up to serve someone other than you. Welcome to the Globalist Plan to Collapse Everything podcast, where we expose the globalists' sinister plans to collapse society so they can build a new world order upon the ashes. This is where we shine the light, expose the darkness, and push back against these evil tyrants. This isn't about conspiracy theories. This is where we analyze facts hiding in plain sight. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Now, before I introduce today's incredible guest, I want to share some of the key findings from the chapter in my book entitled Collapse Number 8, Medical System, because I think the history here matters. I think understanding how we got here is the only way to make sense of where we are today. And frankly, once you hear the story, you may never look at your doctor's office quite the same way again. So let's go back to the early 1900s. Back then, America had a fantastically diverse medical landscape. We had chiropractors, naturopaths, homeopaths, herbalists. Doctors of every variety were practicing their craft. Patients had real choices back then, and many of those choices were grounded in centuries of tradition and practical wisdom. Then along came John D. Rockefeller, the wealthiest man in modern history, a man who made his fortune in oil. And here's the little fun fact that doesn't show up in most history books. Rockefeller had a very specific financial interest in reshaping American medicine. Why? Because up to 99% of pharmaceutical drugs are derived from petrochemicals, from oil. So in 1910, Rockefeller, the oil tycoon, funded a report, the so-called Flexner Report, that was submitted to Congress. The report declared that all natural healing modalities were unscientific, and it recommended that medical licensing be consolidated under the American Medical Association. Congress obliged, and just like that, the competition was legislated out of existence. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie then began pouring money into medical schools across the country, but with a very strict condition attached. The schools could only teach one thing: allopathic medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, prescription medicine. They're all the same. Any curriculum that touched on herbs, nutrition, or natural remedies was scrubbed. Doctors who continued to use natural treatments were defamed in the press. Some were even imprisoned. So a paradigm was born: a pill for an ill. That phrase, as catchy as it is cynical, became the foundation of American healthcare. And those pills, of course, require, no surprise, petroleum. So was this the beginning of something sinister? I have my opinion, but I'll let you decide that for yourself. Either way, the outcome is undeniable. We went from a rich and diverse healing tradition to a system built around patented petrochemical pharmaceuticals, and the man who built it profited enormously from that transformation. So let's fast forward up to today. Have you noticed how few independent doctors' offices are left in your community? Hospital systems and private equity firms have been buying them up at a staggering pace. And here's what the data tells us about what happens when they do. Prices go up, access goes down, and in a study of 50 hospitals acquired by private equity firms, medical errors increased. When the mission shifts from caring for patients to generating returns for investors, it should surprise no one that the quality of care begins to suffer. So, as I see it, the monopolistic model that Rockefeller planted more than a century ago has now grown into something even more powerful and even more indifferent to your well being. And then came COVID-19. Oh, we'll never forget that, will we? And I'll be direct and transparent about this because that's what this podcast is about. The quote, standard of care that we were told to trust, the protocols handed down by the CDC and the NIH, deserve serious scrutiny. The data is now in and it looks really bad. Researchers at the Correlation Institute in Ottawa analyzed all-cause mortality data from 17 countries in the Southern Hemisphere, and what they found was striking. Mortality peaks tracked closely, in some cases almost perfectly, with the timing of mass vaccination campaigns. The numbers don't lie. And then there's Remdesivir, the expensive, intravenous, hospital-only drug that was anointed by the CDC and NIH as the official standard of care. While cheap, widely available, and arguably more effective alternatives were dismissed or actively suppressed. Senator Rand Paul, himself a physician, has made a compelling case that the decision to elevate remdesivir by Dr. Anthony Fauci and others was not a medical one, it was a financial one, and possibly something worse. I want to be clear, these are serious allegations, but they are allegations backed by data, by testimony, and by the lived experience of millions of people who lost someone during the pandemic and found themselves asking why. Are you among those who lost someone dear to you during the pandemic? Here's the bottom line. The medical system in America and across the Western world is in trouble, not just financially, not just logistically, but morally. When a system that exists to heal people becomes more interested in billing you, managing you, and keeping you medicated than in actually restoring your health, that's not healthcare. That's something else entirely. But here's what gives me hope. There are people in this world, real people with real credentials and real conviction, who are stepping outside that broken system to serve patients the old-fashioned way, with skill, with knowledge, with genuine care for the person in front of them. Which brings me to today's guest. Our guest today is someone who has operated at the sharpest possible edge of healthcare, not in a gleaming hospital with every resource at her fingertips, but in austere, high-stakes, resource-limited environments where failure simply isn't an option. Jessica Arno is a paramedic, a midwife, an EMS educator who has been affectionately dubbed the Combat Midwife by over 100,000 U.S. Army combat medics, flight medics, and special operations forces she's trained in preparation for deployments in the global war on terror, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom. Her expertise in pre-hospital obstetric and pediatric emergencies has been published in EMS World magazine, and she has personally delivered babies in conditions that most of us can barely imagine, including an Afghan refugee camp in the chaos following the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Jessica now teaches civilians, families, first responders, and medical professionals the skills they need to handle women's and newborn health emergencies when the system isn't there to help you. You can learn more about her work at combatmidwife.com. The link is in the show notes below. Jessica, welcome to the show. It's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you, Alan. I'm so happy to talk to you today.
This is exciting. So before we get into the big picture, I'd really like for the audience to understand your world a little better. So like when people hear, combat midwife, what does that really mean? And how does someone end up like at the intersection of military medicine and childbirth?
It is a weird intersection. Most people kind of ask the same question you're asking. How the heck did that happen? And it is a kind of cool story. So the combat midwife is a is a really cool name that I got given by my soldiers. I did not come up with that. I can't take ownership of that by any means. It's kind of something you get handed to you, kind of like Maverick or Iceman from Top Gun, right?
Yeah.
So um yeah, so they just started calling me that because I happen to have a midwifery background and I was teaching combat medicine. And so that's how that actually happened. But we have to go way back to really understand, how did I even get there in the first place? Well, I always
Okay.
knew I wanted to deliver babies. It's always been my calling. And like any very A personality, firstborn daughter, firstborn granddaughter, I had my
Okay.
first midlife crisis at 12. And so I kind of said, oh my gosh, what if I go through all this medical school stuff and I can't even handle blood? Because I knew at the time you weren't going to see patients in medical school till year 4 or 5. So I wouldn't want to spend all that money and go, holy heck, I don't really want to do this. Well,
Mm.
I knew I loved delivering babies and I knew I wanted to be around that because I got to watch my siblings be born, which left a really important mark on me when I watched some of the really bad things that happened to my mom. And I said, I don't ever
Mm.
want that to happen to anyone ever again on my watch. So I'm going to be the best provider I can be and make sure those things don't happen.
Okay.
So I started kind of figuring where could I kind of get exposure. And my uncles were firefighters and medics, and they said if you can become a firefighter and a paramedic, you can do anything. So that's exactly what I did. And I
Okay.
fell in love with EMS, but I still had this huge passion for babies and families and moms and being there when life begins. And so I just wanted to really kind of carry that on. So started midwifery school as I started to do some homework and I went, I don't think I really like the Western model of care. I don't think I
Okay.
really enjoy the fact that we've created this sick system and not a healthcare system. And we're just keeping people in this really awful hamster wheel of take this and we're keeping people in a sick state rather than treating people as human beings. And birth is not a medical emergency. It is a
Hmm.
normal physiological process in a woman's life, should she choose to take that path. And there's nothing wrong with it. You and I don't need help going to the restroom in the morning. And birth doesn't need to be interfered with. It's a normal physiological process. So I started doing a ton of homework on midwifery and I fell in love with it. And here I am today. We went to war in the early 2000s and I got a phone call that said, hey, do you want to come teach combat medics? I had no idea what that was, but I've always had a rule, and that is never say no to an interview because you never know what type of relationship you can cultivate.
Yeah.
So I went to the interview. That was a Friday. I got hired the same day. I started on a Monday, and I've been with them ever since in some capacity.
Wow. So I think you've trained, in reading all about you here, you've trained over 100,000 military medics. That's an incredible number.
Y-
In your
Yeah.
experience, in your experience working within military medicine, so how does like you've heard there's the right way, the wrong way, and the army way, I think was the old expression. So how
Yeah.
does how does the military system compare with what, the average American encounters like in civilian healthcare? And is the standard of care in what you do different in any way from the civilian side?
So the standard of care implies that the standard is the best, right? Like there's this
Yeah.
implication that when we say standard of care, this is the goal we should be meeting. However, I
Yeah.
think in American medicine in general, I don't know, possibly the inversion is taking place
Mm.
because it's almost like the standard of care is the minimum. Like we're
Ah.
not really putting in a lot of effort into medicine.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to break that down and dissect it a little bit. And that
Okay.
is, when we talk about things like trauma, orthopedics, the army really, and military medicine and civilian medicine, pretty darn good, right? Like
Okay.
if I've got if I got in a car accident and I have an arm hanging on by some skin, a tendon, maybe a ligament, I definitely want to see ortho. I definitely want to see the trauma surgeon. I definitely want to see
Yeah.
plastics. And I'm
Hmm.
super excited that I'm in the US and maybe not in a third world country. We
Yeah.
we could
Okay.
probably all agree on that because the
Oh, yeah.
data supports that, right? Like
Okay.
the numbers support the outcomes. However, we kind of have to go back again. And why are we good at trauma medicine, orthopedics, plastics? It's because we practiced on military members in trauma scenarios.
Oh,
So
boy.
we're
Okay.
really good at those things because we were able to experiment on men who are healthy, fit between the ages of 18 and 44 in a
Hmm.
very concentrated scenario. So, an
Yeah.
example, a really popular medication, TXA, has been on the market since the 60s, and it was originally used for cardiac problems and for postpartum hemorrhage to control uncontrollable hemorrhaging in those environments. But it
Okay.
didn't get popularized until Vietnam
Mm.
because uh, some military docs who worked in kind of the civilian world said, I wonder if we kind of use this medicine that's really good for this stuff and we use it in trauma, what might transpire? Well, now
Okay.
you talk about TXA with any paramedic or any military medic, and it's catnip to them. They'll talk about that till the cows come home because they
Okay.
know it really works. Well, we know that because we practiced on those individuals. So, but the other side of it is the VA healthcare and
Hmm.
civilian medicine that we're all using every day, and it's not good overall. And the stats show that. I mean, we're very sick individuals. The millennials are the first generation that will most likely not outlive their parents because
Yeah.
they're so ill. We're dealing with things like infertility, we're dealing with autoimmune diseases. And then you look at the military members. So, again, the fittest of the fit, the young, the strong, 18 to 44. You send them
Hmm.
off and make them do a bunch of really horrible things and you bring them back. And now they have no resources and they're the sick of the sick, right?
Mm. Yeah.
We have 22 members of the military taking their own lives every day.
Yeah.
We have hours and hours, months and months, years and years of wait in the VA system. And that's a direct reflection of what has been taking place in the civilian medical facilities for decades.
Yeah.
We translate that all the way over to birth and women's health care. You know, it wasn't until 1993 that we obviously said, hey, do you think maybe we should be talking about um, experimenting with pharmaceuticals on females too? Or should we just look at males?
Okay.
That's absurd. That's that's great. We took out 50% of the population and then we wonder why medicines aren't working. Well, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. And then we also have the worst outcomes when it comes to mother and infant mortality rates. So that when we look at mortality rates in the United States, it's not just did you make it to birth, it's the entire first year. In the last year, so 2025, we just finished up the calculations on the numbers, and that year by far was the worst first year death rate we have ever had in
So why is
record.
that though? What
Well,
would the reason be?
it's multifaceted. I think there's a post-COVID answer, and I think that there is a
Okay.
pre-COVID answer. My
Right.
pre-COVID answer would be things like childhood vaccinations. It would be very sick situations such as we don't have very good water, we don't have very good soils, we don't have, we're getting sprayed all the time. So there's
Hmm.
a plethora of complications that are compounding. And then we
Yeah.
also have to deal with the fact that we have been using obstetric care in women's health care instead of midwifery care. So we are dead last in the top 10 industrialized nations, and all other 9 industrialized nations use midwives before they use OBs.
Wow.
And
How
we
about
rank
that?
56th worldwide. So that means there are 55 other countries it's safer to have a baby in than the United States.
That's
That's
incredible.
that's not something to brag about.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that is incredible. So, what is it about the, obstetric system versus the midwifery method that makes, the midwifery method so much more beneficial, safe, more like, I guess, what other countries do? Why is that so much safer? What is it about that?
Right. So when I'm using the word midwifery, we have to quantify what that word means for me
Yeah.
and
Okay.
this data that I'm going to be providing, because in the
Okay.
United States we have three different pathways to midwifery.
Okay.
Because the U.S. likes to make things complicated. So we have
Of
nurse
course.
midwifery. So we
Hmm.
have someone who's gone to 4 years of nursing school and then goes to a graduate program to become a midwife. We have
Okay.
the certified midwife program, which is under the umbrella of nursing, but it's one of the two non-nursing pathways to midwifery. And then we
Okay.
have the certified professional midwife, which is the second non-nursing pathway and is under a different agency, a governing body. So that's the
Okay.
pathway I took.
All
And
right.
I claim to be a traditional midwife. So I don't believe in licensure. I don't believe the state or the government telling me what I can and cannot do for my patients. And I
Okay.
don't believe in asking the government how to care for them, because I believe in traditional model. So
And
your
is
book,
that what's common in these other countries who practice it? Is it
so
primarily traditional?
it was until
Okay.
most recently. And so we're
Okay.
actually seeing their numbers change to be closer. Each year that goes by, we're seeing their data change, not for the better, but for the
No.
worse, for
Okay.
outcomes, because they're transitioning into that more nurse midwifery model rather than the traditional model. And so we're
Okay.
having these issues where nurse midwives are falling under the APA or whatever would be equivalent to England and Ireland and the
Mhm.
UK, et cetera. But they're falling under that model of physicians control rather than midwives being autonomous care providers. And that's causing the problems.
Mm.
Is like your book demonstrates, it's about profit and speed rather than health outcome.
Yeah.
And what do you want to sell more of? Do you want to sell 5 C-sections that you can do in 5 hours starting at $80,000 a pop? Or
Jeez.
do you want to sell one 24-hour labor, right? That you're
Yeah.
maybe going to make 10 to 12 grand on. Well,
Mhm.
if you're only looking at this as a business model, obviously you want to take option A.
Yeah.
But that's somebody's life that you're dealing with, and we're causing irreparable harm to moms and babies. While C-sections can save a life, the World Health Organization, and I know we don't love them, okay, but there's some
Mhm.
data on their website that's actually super helpful. And they
Okay.
have data of countries and outcomes for moms and babies going back decades and decades. So they have a really cool
Mhm.
interactive graph on their website. And you can look at what's been going on worldwide. And the United States has been getting worse and worse since we villainized and made midwifery illegal, which happened right after Rockefeller took over the
Yeah.
petroleum push, right? So,
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah.
yeah, with that first wave, like you talk about in your book, outline things like naturopathy and herbalism. Midwifery happened about 20 years later, and that was
Okay.
because of the Victorian and Edwardian shift. So we got rid of um, women can't be alone in a room with a man during the Victorian ages, and we had the Edwardian age come in, where a little bit more free natured, um, you know, things were changing culturally with women and men. And so the Rockefellers were like, golly gee whiz, we're missing out on 50% of the population. We should outlaw midwifery. And that's really what began to happen. And you can
Incredible.
search for this online. You can see actual real live wanted posters for midwives in that time period. And it would say things like, your Irish midwife is dirty. She's illiterate. She has warts on her hands. She kills babies. Have your baby in a hospital that's clean and bright and has all the medications you need.
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, So you're kind of touching on a question I wanted to ask. So in the book, like you said, I make the case that the American medical system was deliberately shaped in the early 1900s to
Yeah,
favor pharmaceutical treatments over natural remedies for
right,
financial reasons. So
correct.
so it sounds like that resonates. I mean, what about the use of pharmaceutical treatments in the hospital version versus how you do it? Is there any difference in terms of that particular aspect, the use of pharmaceuticals?
I very rarely use pharmaceuticals. I love plant medicine. I love homeopathy. I love working
Okay.
side by side functional medicine doctors. I love using what would be considered alternative medicine. I don't like using that term because it's been the medicine we've had since the beginning of time. Whenever you believe
Right.
that we've been on this planet,
The pharmaceutical should be called the alternative, right?
Correct, it really should,
Yeah.
and if you break down the word, it does mean witchcraft, and so that's kind of what we're dealing with is a spell, is a use of and petrochemicals to turn it into pharmaceuticals, and that's not something we should be putting in our body. I wouldn't go to the gas tank and guzzle a gallon down, so why are we putting it in pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, and in doing the research for the book, I was stunned to learn that, pharmaceuticals are at least 90% petroleum based. That's like, oh my gosh, we're putting petroleum in our bodies and they're doing all these experiments on, petroleum based chemicals that are in these. It's just absolutely amazing. But as it
Right.
says in the book, Rockefeller was an oil tycoon, so he wanted one more use for oil, and it's just incredible that we're putting petroleum products in our bodies every time we take most pharmaceuticals. So that's incredible to
Right.
me.
There's a reason for that, and that is I cannot put a patent on a flower. I cannot put a
Mm,
patent on bark that's on a tree. You cannot patent something that is organically an
yeah,
organic compound in nature. That you
sure.
can't I can't, put a patent on oxygen, right?
Yeah.
So, because that's not something that we can do, and those are kind of rules of the land, there's a reason that 90% of the blood pressure medication is a petrochemical, because that I can put a patent on. The
Yeah.
other 10% is the plant that is naturally occurring. So, because it's now an ingredient rather than the main ingredient, right? It's an
Hmm.
added
Hmm.
now the plant particle is an additive rather
Yeah.
than the main ingredient.
That's amazing. So, in the book, I talk about the consolidation of healthcare by private equity, that they're buying up
Ugh,
all these
mhm,
doctors' offices, and it seems like doctors' offices get bought up by hospital systems. Hospital systems become parts of even bigger systems. You have these urgent care facilities that are owned by a smaller and smaller group of financiers and
mhm,
so we keep getting back to this idea that the profit motives are driving the whole medical system, it seems like.
yeah,
So from your vantage point, like in pre-hospital care, have you noticed a difference in what patients experience today versus 10 or 15 years ago, just like in the
mhm.
quality of care when you look at that? Can you
Oh, for
see a
sure.
pattern? You okay?
Yeah, if I never see Vanguard Boulevard again, it will be too soon because every time you see a hospital, there's Vanguard's buying up something, and they've always got to have their own boulevard, their own road, their own street, and they got
No.
to name it
My
after
gosh.
them. It's just gross, because you have these well-meaning individuals, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, an EMS professional, right? I, I didn't go into EMS to get rich. I went into it because I really love medicine. I have a passion for helping people. I wanted to be a part of the community that I live in, that I know my neighbor, and I want to be able to provide care for them. I happen to love the history of EMS and being a part of that community and that paramilitary organization, and I have a lot of passion for it. But
Hmm.
yes, absolutely. Even when I was brand new starting out, I definitely remember being told, "Hey, can you rewrite the patient care report because we need to say these three things so Medicaid will pay for it." Uh,
Yeah, I hate that.
oh, okay. I mean, but I didn't do that. It doesn't matter. Just put it in there because we want to make sure that we get paid for this care, or do X, Y, and Z to patient because you need to be able to put it in the run form because you need to be able to get compensation for that. I mean, I just had
No.
a flight medic who's now out of the military and is working in civilian medicine, and he sent me a voice memo on the phone going off on a tangent, which I love to listen to it because I've been there too. And he's going, "Wait, I have to do specific things to patients because of billing? I thought I was
Oh,
providing medical care."
yeah, terrible. And you wonder why the price goes up so much. It keeps going up and going up. It's just a system that feeds on itself
Right.
to keep billing us for more and more things we might not need. I mean,
And
I've heard of I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but people are in a hospital and some doctor will pop his head in and say, "Hey, how are you? Just checking. How are you doing today?" And that's all that happens. And you get billed for all these extra doctors that keep tacking on money onto you like leeches because they're
yes,
kind of trying to do what you're describing in a way, running
right.
up the
Go
bill.
Go get an itemized bill after you have a baby. Always, I mean, if you choose to have a baby in a hospital, which I think that would be really dumb to do, but if that's something that you choose to do, make sure you get an itemized bill because they will charge you for skin to skin. As in the baby's laying on your chest and they're charging you $1,800 for that.
Oh
That's
my
that's
gosh.
that's where babies go after you. By the way, I don't charge for that. That comes with this
Yeah,
package.
you would think. Yeah. Oh, that's something else. So so you have workshops, and in your workshops, you teach civilians how to manage, women's health emergencies, things including like off-grid births and neonatal crises. So, like, what's driving the demand for that kind of training right now? Like, do you think people are worried, or they don't trust the system, or what's behind that interest, that level of interest?
It's all of the above, Alan. It's all of it because people
Okay.
lived through 2020. And what
Ah,
happened when you were giving birth in 2020? You had to drop your wife off at the front door, not inside the hospital, at the front door with the guy that has the
yeah.
wheelchair and the mask on and say, "See you later, babe. Maybe in 3 days I'll see you and the baby. Maybe I won't see either one of you. Maybe I'll just see the baby. I don't know. Have a great time." Because they
Oh,
wouldn't allow partners, they wouldn't allow husbands, they wouldn't allow fathers to come be with the mamas of the baby. Like they wouldn't let anybody go in, which is one, unethical, two, a flat out lie, and three, I don't know how you sleep at night, like doing that to
yeah.
someone. Here's what we'll do. We'll put a woman all by herself in a room with no support, no one to take care of her, and I'm sure her labor will be just fine. C-sections skyrocketed during
Yeah.
2020 because you're alone, you're unattended, you don't have anybody that loves you coming to take care of you. You got nurses in the hallway making booty jiggling videos to put on Tickety Talk.
Yeah,
What what
incredible.
what
I
is
mean, the whole
that?
the whole 2020 experience in terms of the medical system, I think it broke down in a lot of people's minds. The trust went out the window. And the book gets into a lot of that. I
Yes.
mean, things about Fauci, the standard of care, use of remdesivir. I mean, there's all
Yeah.
kinds of things that were very, very questionable. And I think a lot of people had their eyes opened big time, and so as a result, for many, I think the trust went right out the window.
Right. So
Um,
there's everybody's concerned about what's happening next. Are we at war? Are we not at war? Are we having another natural disaster? Are we not having another natural disaster? Are they messing with the weather? Are they not? Are we going to have a food crash? So people are going, I can't take my loved ones to the hospital. Can I do this at home? And the answer is yes, most of the time. You absolutely can. There are very few situations that we need modern medicine when it comes to obstetric care, right? An
okay.
example would be I got in a car accident and I'm bleeding internally and I'm 6 months pregnant. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really happy that we have all the bells and whistles, and we can take that mom and baby to the hospital, and we can use what we need to use at that situation. But just because it's taking her too long to that's not a reason to do a cesarean section. That's
Yeah.
that's not a reason.
Yeah,
It
that's
never
incredible.
has been. And even the World Health Organization says less than 10% of births worldwide should ever result in a C-section. The
Man.
national average, the last time it was looked at, which was more than 10 years ago, was 34%. I can tell you right now, there are states in the US that have way over 50% C-section rates. And you cannot tell me
Unbelievable.
that 50% of the female population is broken. Their vagina
No.
doesn't work. You can't tell me that.
Yeah, that's incredible. Is it are C-sections another moneymaker? Does that add on
Absolutely.
significantly? Okay.
Yeah, so you're making 50, 80 plus $1,000 and it takes you 30 minutes from open to close. You can back those babies up,
Unbelievable.
pun intended, and you can absolutely knock a bunch of those out and schedule those so you can have roast beef dinner on Sunday with your wife and kids, or go to the golf match, or plan your vacation. I've had late transfers to my care as a midwife, because the woman will go, this was the last straw. He wants to go on vacation, so he wants to induce me or do a C-section
Unbelievable.
on the Friday before he leaves for his vacation. That's not a
Ah,
reason to evict a baby.
yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. So, um, I was with my wife when she had our kids, and
Hmm.
so I'm sure there's lots of dads or let's say future dads listening to this podcast as well.
Yeah.
So what's your top advice for dads who want to feel less helpless? Help their wife be more prepared when it comes to birth. Like, what would you say to dads?
Come hang out with me and take my class. It's a 1-day class. The first half of it is we're going to sit in a classroom and do some lecture style learning, but the rest of the day is hands on. I bring my mannequins. You're going to learn how to do these things, and it's not just how to catch a baby. I can teach a 5-year-old how to do that in about 30 minutes. It's
Okay.
really about how to understand her cycle. How do you take care of a UTI or a yeast infection? Or what do you do with a 3-month-old baby who's not nursing appropriately? Or what do you do with a 4-month-old with a fever? And you choose not to use the health system that's in the United States, you can't access it because of you're far away. There's a natural disaster, there's civil unrest, there's war in your back door. What can you do in your own home and use the things that you most likely already have in your house? You just don't know to use them this way. And so I'm going to
Yeah.
take my military education, I'm going to take my civilian austere medicine education, and I'm going to throw it all at you and say, look, I can't be here forever. I'm not going to be on this planet forever. So let me bestow to you and let you glean upon my knowledge and go forth and prosper, because let's make some really great, little warrior babies for the next generation.
That's awesome. So before I let you go, tell us where people can find you, follow you, how to get trained, and anything else you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, so combatmidwife.com is my website. You can come hang out with me there. I'm on all the social medias under the same platform, and I answer DMs. You're talking to me. So if you want to ask a question, that's fine, but if it's a lengthy one, send me an email and then I'll point you in the right direction. I have workshops across the country, and summer ones are already up, which is great. And then I talk at conferences all over the country constantly, and yeah, it's really fun. It's a great way to learn education. I have a bunch of online courses. I have a free workshop on the website, tons of stuff. Come hang out.
That's awesome. So the work you're doing, taking care of people, helping them learn to take care of each other when the system isn't available or when they choose not to use it for the reasons we talked about,
Mhm.
that's the kind of resilience that I believe our communities need to build. So I really want to thank you for being here. And folks, if today's conversation stirred something in you, you're curious about all this, I want to encourage you not to let that feeling fade. So go find Jessica at combatmidwife.com. Get trained, take a step toward being less dependent on a system that may not show up for you when you need it the most, and use the links in the show notes and discount code APR to save 20% on her workshops. And if you want the full picture, the history, the data, the bigger picture the globalists have in mind for the rest of us, you can find it in my book. The medical system is just one chapter of a much larger story, and the more people understand that story, the harder it becomes to keep the rest of us in the dark. So, Jessica, thanks so much for being with us. And hey, everybody, until next time, shine the light, expose the darkness, and push back against globalism. Please remember to check out all my podcasts at rumble.com/The Globalist Plan. And head over to globalcollapsebook.com, where you can see lots of interviews and order a signed copy of my book, The Globalist Plan to Collapse Everything to Usher in a New World Order. That'll do it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to catch us next time.